use this one. Yeah.
Yes. This is for the public.
No, we're missing 8 people. They're probably in toilet.
Yep.
And we know that Fernando will secure the... Should I do the schedule or will you do it? You will do it? Yeah, so we have to leave the hotel.
Everyone.
Going to fall asleep now.
Yeah.
Just
After lunch dip. Yeah.
Okay, who are we missing?
Eduardo. Only Eduardo. Janova. Is it only Eduardo that's missing? Agato as well. Yeah. Okay, so everyone has arrived. Before starting with the session about the invasive species, maybe something about the program for this afternoon. After this session, we will return to the hotel firstly, so you can have a shower or change clothes or have a little rest. And then around 5:15, we will go to Badajoz again. Yeah, because most of the people say they want some free time in Badajoz. So we will have a quick pass by the hotel, leave your stuff there, and then we go to Badajoz. You can have a drink there, walk around, whatever you want. Fernando, the vice dean of this department, he will make a reservation at a restaurant where we also have some space or some area where the Belgian evening can take place. Yeah, we are prepared, Axel. Okay, So then today I will take you to through the invasive species or the invasive process of species, because as you know already, water hyacinth is one of the most aggressive invaders in our ecosystems. But when we are talking about invasive species or non-invasive species or native species, what's in a name? What do we mean with it? Or do we speak about exotic species? And how is the process of invasiveness going through? So, native species, non-native species. Native species is a species occurring in its own natural living area. And when I show you this picture, you recognize both species, the elm oak or the English oak. You see the environment is totally different. Although the title is native, but is it native? And why it is native or why it's not native? When I'm teaching this course in Belgium, I'm talking about the English oak or Quercus rubor, which is a native species in Belgium, in Western Europe, in the Mediterranean area. But elm oak, it's also a native species, but when we are here in the Mediterranean area. So talking about native or non-native or exotic species, it depends of the area where you are. Yeah. So we can also change point of view and saying when we are in Iberic Peninsula, the English oak, it's a non-native species, is an alien species. Yeah, it's true, because you're speaking from the point of view, what is the natural area of the species. And also when we're talking about water hyacinth, there is an area, you know, the Amazon catchment, where water hyacinth is a native species, where it's not having the problems or causing the problems that it is doing here in Spain or in Thailand or in Kenya. So native, non-native, it depends of the place where we are, the area where we are talking about it. And not every exotic or not every non-native species will be invasive, will cause the problems we are facing with the water hyacinth. There is another term that we use in ecology, and it's endemic species. Endemic species is also a species very indicated to a small living area. And it can be a family of a bigger family, like the lynx. On the left side you see Lynx pardinus, it's the Iberic lynx. Or you see lynx in Latin terms, it's a Europe-Asiatic lynx, which has a much more bigger living area. Both are family, long time ago, both species are families, but they did an evolution that makes them two different species. And the Iberic lynx, it's a very rare animal. Only in the green spots, you can't hardly see it. Only there the Iberic species is still living. But when it used to have a bit, well, it wasn't so rare as it's now, it also had a very small living area. Only Spain, south of France and Italy comparable to the other lynx. So endemic means a native species which has only a very small living area. And now we are talking about invasive species. But when I just said the water hyacinth, it's not invasive everywhere. So invasive, it's connected to the way a species expands himself abroad his natural area, abroad his natural living area. And as you can see, water hyacinth, he spreads around a big part of the world already. Well, so talking about native or non-native, it's about talking about natural living area. And the non-native of the exotic species, most of the time humans were involved in getting the species out of its natural area by purpose or by accident. But when you see through history, an ocean, climate that isn't suitable. So the natural habitat was the area that was determined by some biotic or abiotic characteristics. Biotic, it means living species, animals or plants. Abiotic, it means physical, chemical characteristics. Yeah. So these plants, animals, they have the area where they can perform on its peak. Yeah? They can have a peak performance. They are in their comfort zone, like we are also in a comfort zone when we have the right conditions. But when we go abroad, our comfort zone, we see it and we feel a bit uncomfortable. And behind some limits, we won't be able to live at all. Like when we go to Antarctica without the right clothes, we cannot stand there. So for animals also, they have their natural living area, but you have an environmental gradient, temperature, rainfall, food supply. It will all shift from one parameter to another, from cold to warm, acidity, low acidity, high acidity, and so on. So every animal has its ecological habitat or its ecological niche where it is feeling comfortable living between some, sometimes the populations go up, sometimes it goes down a bit. The graph that, who was telling it, Eva or one of your, yeah, the prey-predator balance, it's in imbalance. And that is what we have in an ecosystem. All the elements of the ecosystem, they are in balance. And every animal, every plant, every animal has its own ecological niche. Yeah? Like these are two little birds frequently seen in Belgian gardens, and they use the same habitat. They use deciduous trees, some open area. So we see them living together. But they are not in competition with each other because the great-tit with a black head, he eats bigger insects than the smaller blue-tit. You see on the vertical axis you have the size of the insects or the prey they eat, and also their nesting places are different in how big they are. So although they are living in the same habitat, they have their own specific niche. And that's important to understand because species can occur in the same habitat. For instance, a deciduous forest in West Europe or coniferous wood in the Scandinavian areas. But they make a home to many species, and every species has its own niche. And sometimes when the ecosystem is degraded, or when the ecosystem is quite young, like the North Sea, it's only 8,000 years old after the last period of ice age. Yeah, that was a period that the North Sea was formed. So actually, in all the history of the Earth, of the ecosystem of Earth, it's very young. So there are niches maybe not taken, or in a degraded ecosystem, some niches are free. And when two species have the same requirements, the same ecological requirements, they will go in competition, but in an ecosystem that is in balance, every species has its own niche and they are living next to each other, depending on each other. Yeah, because the one is eaten by another, that one is eaten by another species, and so there is a very complex structure of species who are in balance. And sometimes there is a new one, a non-native species, who is entering the habitat and who is taking all those area, which means that the species is expanding very fast because some reasons, a young ecosystem, a degraded ecosystem, some pollution or whatever, and we call that species an invader, an invasive species, taking the dominance in that ecosystem. So it has a harmful impact because the balance that we were talking about, they destroy the balance and they take over the ecosystem. So native, endemic, exotic, invasive, depending from what area, from which point of view we are talking, which living area we are talking, and also the behavior of the species. So when we think about species entering a new region, first thing they do is crossing a geographic barrier. The Waterhyacinth comes from the Amazon catchment. It crosses a geographical barrier. Yeah. Then we call it an exotic species or a non-native species. When the species can stay in the new environment, it can stay the local conditions, we can say it's a acclimatized species. It can stand the temperature, the climate, and so on. Next step is that the new species can take the reproduction barrier. It can reproduce itself, make offspring. Because in biology, making offspring, actually that's the meaning of life. And that's a very important thing in biology. When a species can reproduce itself, it means it can stand and hold a viable population. It's also important when researchers do some hair introductions of species. You can put, like fishes in Belgium, we try to support our local fish because the ecosystem is also degraded a little bit. And when they are researching if the reintroduction is successful, they are looking for small fishes. So if the species can reproduce, it's a good sign from also depending which species we are talking about. And then the last barrier is the dispersal barrier. When a species cannot only reproduce but expanding in a fast way, we are talking about an invasive species. Not every non-native species who is entering and who is introduced in the new or in a region will be a problem. Let's say 1,000 different species, 1,000 new species are entering a region. Only 10% will handle the new situation. Like the olm oak I said in the beginning, it won't last long in Belgium, and the other way, the English oak won't last long in Spain because it's too hot, it's too dry. So not everyone or not every new species can handle that. Another 10% of those introduced species, acclimatized species can reproduce. Reproduction also needs or requires some specific needs. Nesting places, spawning places, and so on. So only 10 of the 1,000 introduced species can reproduce. And of those 10 species who can reproduce, only one will expand. So from 1,000 species entering a region, only one will become an invasive species. But that species will harm the ecosystem a lot and will be a big problem. So those exotic invasive species, they are characterized by occurring outside their natural area. They can handle local conditions, they can reproduce, and they can expand and become dominant in a local ecosystem. So the expansion, the way they can expand is will have a strongly negative impact on biodiversity, because biodiversity, it's in the name. Diversity in biology diversity in different species who keep each other in balance. The prey-predator relation, who are the difference in species who are connected to each other. So if we have those 4 criteria, and especially the expanding and getting dominant, then we are talking about invasive species. So the introduction, how the native species is entering a region, there are many ways of introduction, introducing a new area. One of them, because of the international trade and transport, shipping or land transport, will be a major vector of introducing new species, because the ocean-going vessels, when they load weight, when they load containers, they are heavy, they are low in the water, they are heavy. When they decharge the containers or the weight, they have to fill the vessel with some ballast water. And when you enter water in China and you come to Antwerp or Amsterdam, then you let the ballast water out of the vessel again. You're just moving species from the ocean, the sea, Chinese coast to European coast. That's only also the way that the Chinese mitten crab, or what's the name, Chinese Holland crab, has become an invasive species in Flanders. Also dry ballast using sand or cereals in ships. Rats are also spread around all the world, different genetics, different species of rats. Taking the plane and spreading pathogens, might spread pathogens. Also by infrastructure we are making, so here you can see the Rhine-Danube canal connecting the Black Sea and the North Sea is the shortest canal between those two regions, and it's also a gateway for different species entering West European catchments. And you see 2 Gobio species. The left one is our local native species, which is pushed aside by the one coming from the Black Sea. Also the Suez Canal, when it was installed, when it opened, a lot of invasive species entered the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, trade in plants and animals. A lot of those invasive species or exotic species are beautiful, are big, are having a lot of colors, flowering a lot, like Waterhyacinth, and people buy them for ornamental reasons, put them in the garden or in an aquarium, but after some time they become too big, like the bullfrog you see here, or the red cheek turtle. They become too big, they put them in nature, they put them in the wild, and that's how an ecological problem can start. Knowing now the invasive process, all the 4 steps we saw. Because they are beautiful. Waterhyacinth, it's a beautiful plant. It is. It has been sold for years in Belgian gardening shops, but then it escaped. People release the species, the animal or the plant, because it's getting too big, or it escapes. And when we see what's the origin of the species that are causing the problem, where are most of the invasive species coming from, we see more species moving from east to west and from north to south because of the same climate belts. You know? As you can see on this map, it's the it's for Waterhyacinth, the possibility of occurrence, the climate where it is assumed that it can develop. And of course you can see the Amazon catchment, but you see on the same climate belt also the middle of Africa, Southeast Asia, which are which shows a climate that's suitable for water hyacinth. More than northwest, it's too cold. In North America, in Europe, it's too cold for water hyacinth. But when climate change is occurring and climate belts are moving upwards, warmer areas are moving upwards, and that's why Spain, south of France, is becoming more suitable for water hyacinth. In this moment, water hyacinth, it is in Belgium, but it is not reproducing in an invasive way because it's too cold. Every winter there is a cold period, and it's water hyacinth is not expanding because of that, but climate change in our mind, it might change in the future. So the east-west migration is occurring more than the northwest migration. And also you see a lot of, this now especially also for water hyacinth, but the areas with a lot of biodiversity, like Amazon area, it's an area with a high number of species. Of course, a lot of species are coming from there, because when you are in an ecosystem with many species, there is a big competitiveness. So the species are, how you say, they become bigger, they have specific strategies. So they are more likely, there are many species, they are more likely to immigrate, and because they are competing with many species, they have good strategies to survive, so they immigrate successfully. And areas with many species, they have a high selection pressure, so survival of the fittest, let's say, so they have more competitiveness species. And the east-west migration, I already told, that are similar ecological conditions, or might be similar ecological conditions, so that's why there is a more east-west migration. An interesting thing to think about is that some ecosystems are more vulnerable to exotic species. For instance, areas with seasonal variations, like in Belgium or in the Netherlands, we have seasons, so in wintertime more plants are dying, more annual plants are dying, so that's the moment that there is a gap for exotic species to enter, you know. When there are many species, there is a lot of competitiveness. The barren period where annual species, perennials, will die, it creates a gap, you know. Remote or isolated areas, not many prey predators are there, so there are a lot of animals, plants who don't have the pressure of predation. So when there comes a new species, they can destroy the ecosystem faster. And young ecosystem, what I was telling about North Sea, it's only 8,000 years in ecology, it's not so long. So there are niches that are not occupied yet and can be taken in. And disturbed ecosystems, which is also an important one, because ecosystems are decreasing, quality of ecosystems are going down. For instance, in Belgium, quality of water has went down. Populations of local fish went down, so that are all degraded ecosystems or disturbed ecosystems. So it's more easy for invasive species to become invasive in an ecosystem that is not very biodiverse. So in biodiverse ecosystems, it's more difficult for an invader to find its way. And although only one species per 1,000 will become invasive, the invaders are on the rise. I can show different graphs of this. These are along the graph, along the symbol, in Baltic Seas, in the Great Lakes, and so on. But you can take different graphs which indicates that invasive species are rising. Although you know that it's not an easy process. It takes, after the geographic barrier, the barrier of reproduction, and then the expanding barrier. So trade and traveling and climate change, they are mitigating the process of invasive species. The impact of invasive species is triple-fold, triple burden of the invaders. As I said before, the balance in an ecosystem is broken down because the invasive species is competing with local species. They will, for instance, for Waterhyacinth, they will block the sunlight. They will interfere in the prey-predator relation, and so on, or they will have the secretion of toxic substances. So invasive species are dominating in a new ecosystem because they become bigger, because they have a better strategy of taking nutrients, because they don't have enemies in that ecosystem. So the balance in the ecosystem where all species are connected with each other, is degraded. As you can see here, it's a floating pennyworth. It's not water hyacinth. It's also blocking all the river, preventing sunlight to enter, preventing animals using the surface of the water, preventing or destroying water dynamics. So it has a big impact on local ecosystem. The impact of invasive species is also on economic side. We make huge efforts of eradicating the species, and that costs a lot of money because the invasive character of the species is very strong, and most of the time people only notice it's a problem when the problem is already established, because every invasive species started as one single plant or one single animal somewhere. By incidents it came in the ecosystem, or someone put this red cheek turtle in the river without knowing what the problem will be. So we see the problem, or we take the problem when the problem is established. And the invasive species also have an impact on quality of life or on our health. For instance, this great balsam, it can give you sunburn. It's also an invasive species in Belgium. You see them along the sides of the road or the railroads. Reuzenbalsemien. Yeah.
Also in Norway.
Yeah, yeah. It's Reuzenbalsemien. Yeah. So besides impact on our local health, invasive species can also be a vector of diseases, parasites, mosquitoes being a vector of tropical diseases, and also healthy ecosystems means healthy life. We don't stand so much by the idea that we need healthy ecosystems to have a healthy life as well. So, triple burden of the invasive species, and European Union is aware of these problems. Since 2014 there is a regulation about it, the Invasive Alien Species Regulation. It is incorporated in all member states. So all the European Union has to take some measurements to prevent or to detect the species, and when it is spread already, to try to manage the species that it is not spreading further. And the most important element of this regulation is the blacklist. The Union list of the blacklist, it's a list of 100 species which are very, very invasive. Waterhyacinth is also on that list, and there is a total ban on trading, possession, transportation of those plants and animals. So you can't buy any waterhyacinth anymore in the garden shops because of the dangerous character, the invasive character of the waterhyacinth. When new species are introduced in a region by purpose or by coincidence, we can see kind of a graph which is represented here. On the vertical axis you can see the area that is taken by the plant and also the costs to manage the plant, and on the horizontal axis you can see the time. So time is very important in the invasive process. The longer it takes to act, the longer or the bigger the problem is becoming. So in the beginning there is no waterhyacinth, no great balm, no Chinese mitter crab in the ecosystem, and we have to try to prevent that it is getting introduced. But then there is a moment of introduction, and we have to try to detect it very early and manage to get it out when eradication is still feasible. But most of the time the problem is seen when the problem is established, when the plant or the animal is spread already and is damaging local ecosystems. And then you are somewhere halfway the graph, and eradication is not so easy anymore. It asks a lot of effort, a lot of work, money. So the best thing they try to do is local control, long-term control, not to expand the area anymore. So it's quite the same graph, a bit different, but you see also the economic returns. When you can prevent a species entering a new ecosystem, it's more cost efficient than when you try to eradicate the species when it has established itself. Okay. Okay, so prevention, it's the cheapest and the best solution. What I said about waterhyacinth, it's an article, blacklist was published, and it's an article that is reporting about the ban, the total ban for selling and trading waterhyacinth. And there was a lot of buzz around because people like to buy this beautiful plant, but not knowing that it was causing such big problems. So there is a ban on it. And beside the prevention, we also, or Europe tries to create an early warning system, because preventing is one thing, but also detecting the species in a very early stage when it's only one isolated population, and then it might be likely to eradicate, but when it is established it's much more difficult. It's only like 4 or 5 years that it's introduced in Belgium. and it's already widespread. Of course, an animal can spread itself much more faster than a plant, but early warning systems are very important, and that's also regulated by Europe. So between the member states, there are scientists exchanging data about those species. And of course, when the problem is established, it's not always easy to eradicate the invasive species like Waterhyacinth. We won't get rid of it anymore in some areas. And then people or researchers try to collect them and try not to expand the problem, but it's not that easy, because sometimes you make the problem worse when you try to eradicate the plant or the animal. For instance, Japanese knotweed, Japanse duizendknoop, it's also a plant. They try to mow it, and then there are small particles of the plants spreading around by mowing it, and you create another place where the plant finds a place to grow, and so you are spreading the problem. And that's also a thing that you have to think about when you're making a harvesting machine or something, that collecting and harvesting the plant, it won't make the problem worse, of course. Also, restoring and enhancing native biodiversity. An ecosystem that is biodiverse has much more resilience against invasive species. For instance, clean waters. It was said in the morning, clean water. Waterhyacinth is a plant which prefers some nutrients, some eutrophic water. So when you have clean waters, Waterhyacinth is not really in its comfort zone. But also for other invasive species, when you make your ecosystem biodiverse, there are much more plants and animals the invader has to get to deal with to find a place in the ecosystem. So you can try to collect the invaders, but what I said, think about not making the problem worse, because maybe you break the plant and some parts of the plant are getting loose and will spread them to another place, or when you are collecting the plant, maybe like this, you break the roots, and the roots, maybe it's the plant reproduce itself by vegetal reproduction, then you get extra reproduction. So there are some concerns about trying to eradicate an exotic species. The bullfrog, it's also one of the invaders we don't like in Belgium. It's a huge frog, also bought and put in the pond in the garden because it's a beautiful big frog, but then it becomes too big. It also makes a lot of noise, so people want to get rid of it. And it escaped into the wild, and it's competing with local frogs and other amphibians, and it's taken over all the ecosystem. They try to remove this species from the ecosystem in Belgium, but you never can take them all, so they will spread again, they will reproduce again, and they will take the empty niche, like I told before. So now researchers try to produce sterile frogs, so the fertilization stops, and there won't be so much offspring, and the local frogs can, or native frogs can grow in population a little bit. So it's a difficult balance, new balance they try to find. keeping the bullfrog in control, not expanding anymore, but getting rid of it will be very difficult. So that's some information about the invasive process. I want you to think about the invasive process of Waterhyacinth. You know already a lot of it, but think about it in a way of what can it mean for my project. Like the geographic barrier, that's clear. It comes from the Amazon catchment and now it's here, but what is the environmental barrier? What does the plant need? And that's important for your project as well. Does it need deep water or shallow water? Does it need clear water or more eutroph water? Does it need some currency or slow water, not moving water? Is it rooting in the soil or is it only a floating plant? Because knowing that is very important to create a harvesting machine. Because do you have to pull out the roots which are into the soil, or you just can collect a plant which is floating on the water? When you're collecting, are you causing some turbidity? You know, when the sludge is mixing with the water is not so clean anymore. Maybe you are enhancing the plant by collecting them. So that are crucial questions. Also the reproduction. How is the plant reproducing? By seeds, vegetable reproduction. Do you stimulate reproduction, if it's vegetable, by breaking the roots? Or I heard Eva says you can when you freeze the seeds, they won't become viable anymore. That's also an important thing. Why is the plant not invasive in the Amazon? Is there a predator? Where is the predator living on the seeds, on the flowers, on the leaves? So there are a lot of questions, but you have to start from the ecology of the plants. Is it living with other plants or not? Is it also in Amazon region, one big plate of Waterhyacinth? Does it have some toxic substances and so on? So I think there are 4 groups. They're all producing something. Also the biocircular students. What is the more the ecological structure or the biological structure of the plant? How long does it take from seed to adult plant and so on? I put some extra sites with information about it, so you can use that sites also. So maybe you can divide in the 4 groups as you did in the morning, and let's say how long shall we give them? It's now 3:30, like 45 minutes or something. 45 minutes to think about how can we use knowledge about ecology, about biology of the plant to put in your solution. Yeah? Is that a clear assignment? Yeah? Okay, so you can spread in this room or you can go abroad. And then afterwards you can come and present some of your findings.
Short time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit short. We'll be if we
the